All right, hey friends. So I have another review to do, and it's a pretty weirdly unusual deck for me in that it's a straight up Waite-Smith deck, and it's none of the things that I usually want in a deck, which just goes to show you that I am mercurial and a weirdo. It's a pretty standard issue Waite-Smith deck. It's just something about it that captured me, and I don't read with a lot of Waite-Smith decks for various reasons, But sometimes I do, and it's what I learned on, And it's always kind of interesting to have. I guess the thing is that sometimes clients kind of expect a Waite-Smith situation, so it's always nice to have one in your back pocket. I have my go-tos, but I don't know. This might be a go-to. So, but again, it's not. It's none of the things I usually want. But I thought I would just sort of share it and show it to you, and let you make up your minds about it, and maybe ramble a tiny bit about Waite-Smith, and yeah, I think that's it. So I'm gonna zoom in a little bit here. So this is the Soul Sparkle Tarot, and it was something that I backed on Kickstarter. Again, I don't quite remember why. It was something that I just backed on a whim, and it was created by Wheel of Fortune Tarot in Shenzhen, and from what I can gather, actually, it's a printing company. And I'll leave the link to their Etsy shop because they have other tarot decks. It's a printing company, and I think that these decks might in part be designed to kind of show the printing techniques they can do. And this actually has a pretty interesting printing technique, so there's something to that. But they also know, whoever did this, there's no artist credited. The author of the book is credited. So I don't know if the owner of the company did it. I did a little Googling. I couldn't really find much. It's a Chinese company. The person who created the Kickstarter, you there's some videos of them at work. So I don't know if she's sort of the artist or what. I don't know. I have no idea who did the art on this. But there are some interesting techniques here. Printing wise, so I kind of feel like they're like, well, we can print your tarot deck and look at the stuff we can do. We have tarot decks that can showcase our techniques, I guess is what I was trying to say. And there's actually a history of doing this. I mean, the Palladino deck, David Palladino, I think it was his first name, created the Palladino Tarot, the new Palladino Tarot, and the Aquarian Tarot. And the Aquarian Tarot seems to have come kind of from the Linweave Tarot, which was a large a deck from a company showing off their paper and colors and printing. And if you go to Mindful Tarot, Esther has a walkthrough of that deck. It's an interesting curio if you've never seen it. So anyway, my point is that this is sort of having a deck as a printing demo is actually not unusual, and it certainly doesn't sour the deck for me. And I really weirdly like it. I mean, it's beautifully. I mean, if you're looking for a printer for a deck, I mean, I guess you can't really beat it. They've done some amazing magnetic work on the box. There's a little book, and I have to tell you, the book is actually really nicely done. Again, whoever did this knows tarot, and I think their name isn't actually the back of the book. This booklet was written by Joan Marie. You can see more of her work at her website, Rabbit's Moon Tarot, www.rabbitsmoontarot.com. There's no artist credit. Shenzhen XM Playing Cards Company Limited, Shenzhen The Wheel of Fortune Spiritual Art Creation Company Limited. We are your personal tarot printing manufacturer. And then there's contact information. But the book itself is kind of nice. There's keywords for each card, then there's a little quote, and then a description. And even the numerology descriptions in the front are kind of pretty good. I mean, it's a pretty good primer. Twos are about balance and also about imbalance. They indicate choices. The threes address the question of stability. Think of a three-legged stool. They are about foundations and making things real. Fours about structure and plans. Fours ask us to look closely at our work and how to bring it into order. I mean, that's pretty good numerology for the tarot. The sevens ask us what we are willing to do to get what we want. They also expect us to know what it is. So, like, that's actually not far from how I look at sevens. I look at sevens as in introspection. But there's something to that. So anyway, yeah. So nice box, nice book. These are the backs, and you're gonna see that there's different printing techniques. So this has kind of a gold stamping, and of course it's gonna be difficult to showcase on video. Oh, that's actually not. Yeah, you can kind of see that. Where's my sense of direction here? So the back has these. Now, this is the thing. Like, these kinds of embellishments, I have to say, usually I am not a fan of. I find them sort of distracting and ostentatious. This is not the case with this deck. Like, I don't hate it. I don't love it. But the other thing about it is that sometimes when you get decks like this, like, the impression that it creates on the back actually bleeds through to the front. But that's not the case here. Really, it's actually beautifully printed. Like, again, like, if you're publishing a deck and you're like, boy, I need a printer, I got a printer for you. So then there's just a little card, again, with contact information. I'll try to remember to put a link to the Kickstarter, too. So you can, I mean, obviously, it's already shipped, but I imagine they're going to sell it because they have an Etsy shop. So then the front of the card has similar outlines, and then this is really going to be tough to see, I think. Come on. So, not too bad. That's the benefit of this crazy camera that I'm using right now. So it's got some holographic stuff going on, but it's very subtle, and I like it a lot. It's I don't know, it's a little trippy in a good way, I'm not gonna lie. Yeah, like, again, something I'm not generally very wild about, but it's really pretty. So we're gonna, so it actually, I pulled this out, so this is one of Carol Herzer's decks, and this is old. This was my very first indie deck, so that would make it, I mean, I think 1999, 2000, so this is like a 23-year-old deck. But it's an indie deck. She still does these. There's different editions now. But this, she hand-painted kind of an iridescent, this really will be hard. It's very, very subtle because, of course, it's hand-done. You can kind of see it there. But she sort of painted on iridescent paint on top of prints of her painting. So she painted this, and then she would have it printed and then paint on, in this case, iridescence. She's done glitters. There's different versions of it. This is and has been in many ways my favorite Waite Smith deck for a long time, because it sort of takes the I don't know why I'm holding it so close to the camera. It sort of takes the deck and just gives it, like, the thing I've always hated about the deck is how, like, the color palette, but this is like, come on, like, it's trippy, it's hippie, it's good, I love it, give me more. So, like, this is the vibe that I've been looking for, or was looking for back then in the deck. Now, I don't use this very much, principally because I don't work with Waite Smith a lot, but also this was very expensive. I don't know if you, like, again, this shows no wear and tear. It's been 23 or so years. And it's really just laminated paper, but it's so beautifully done. And let me just put this away for a second. I know that you came here to see one deck, but I'm showing you this one. I've showed this before too, but it actually shuffles so, like, beautifully, and, like, it's laminated, so it's really resilient. The thing that stops me from, like, bringing it places is really just that it was expensive, and I haven't been to her website, but she wasn't making this version of it anymore. So, but in terms of a Waite Smith situation, this was to me about as good as it gets. There are a couple other Waite Smith decks that I will work with. There were many, many years where I worked principally with the Hanson Roberts deck. In retrospect, I don't know why. There's something, I don't know, maybe it just was easy for me at that age. I don't know. It was very inoffensive and not scary. Other straight up Waite Smith decks, I mean, the Lazy Crow was one that I really liked, and I have a video of that, but I don't think you can get it anymore. But this Carol Herzer's decks are just chef's kiss. And this was an early investment. I really couldn't even afford this when I got this. I was like living on my own on credit cards, basically, but it's stayed with me all these years, and I really, really love it. So, it's a strange thing. It's funny. So I'm going to start walking through the deck, because that's what you came here to see. So, other one, like the Robin Wood was another one that I worked with a lot, but that one always sort of, like, even before I was sort of thinking about diversity in decks, like, that one just seemed exceptionally white. That Wheel of Fortune in that deck is really unfortunate, ironically. So I don't know. I was like on a journey to find the perfect deck, and I never did. You know what I mean? Because, well, first of all, there isn't one, and second of all, I really did not want all the Christian imagery in the Waite Smith deck, but I also couldn't find anything better, so I just sort of worked with it. But then as I started moving into alternative decks, pip decks, etc., that was a very freeing moment. When I come back to Waite Smith today, it's like coming back to family, but everything that means, by which I mean, it's lovely and safe in some ways, and also, like, I immediately get irritated that, Grandpa's still using language that we've long known is offensive. You know what I mean? Like, to me, the Waite Smith is sort of your family, or my family, with all the things I like about it and all the things that irritate me about it. And I think that for many of us who started learning with Waite Smith, we feel that way. Like, there's a sort of love for it. I love this Hermit, incidentally. It's sort of giving Little Red Riding Hood, but just also, like, let me just let it zoomify. Come on. Like, the lantern and just, I don't know, this sort of, like, everything I love in a Hermit card. What was I saying? I think for a lot of us who learned Waite Smith, because that's all there was, we sort of have a love-hate relationship with it. Like, we want to love it, because in a way, you sort of wish your first deck could be your only deck, right? And again, like, I'm speaking very generally. Like, I know this does not apply to everybody. There's a lot of folks who straight up hate the Waite Smith for many valid reasons. Like, for me, it's as complicated as family, I guess, is what I'm saying. But it's iconic, and we know, like, Pamela Coleman Smith may have been, like, cosplaying, being a woman of color, right? Like, probably not so much. Definitely Orientalism was alive and well in the UK at that time, by which, itself being an unfortunate word, indicating, anything exotic was in, it was fashion. Kind of like today we would say, my culture isn't your costume. Like, at that time, boy, was your culture their costume. And so you see that in the deck. You know what I mean? Like, you see kind of mock culture, mock ethnicities in there. It's, and at the same time, like, Pamela Coleman Smith was definitely marginalized in her way as a woman, as sort of a bohemian, You know what I mean? Like, she did not make much money at all. She said herself from the Waite Smith deck. You know, for a long time, her name wasn't part of it. You know, because the publisher and Waite got the credit. You know, Waite didn't do anything but write the book and just sort of nitpick her art, which he didn't even do, you know, fully, right? So, like, Pamela Coleman Smith, like, problematic slash iconic. And, you know, I read an article the other day called Everything is Problematic to It Anyway, or Everyone is Problematic to It Anyway. It's going to, you know, create complicated feelings for a lot of folks, but essentially it's a witch, really, a sort of, you know, spiritual herbalist practitioner, you know, talking about like, oh, this person whose work I really like is also really an asshole and kind of terrible. And, you know, there's this other root worker who's making money off of this and that, but at the same time has preserved, you know, my people's culture, me now saying this in the voice of the person who wrote the piece, that we wouldn't have had any other way. And so, like, it is an interesting thing, you know, to say like, well, you know, can you use the magic? Can you use the work of someone who's problematic? And like, I think more and more we're realizing that like it's kind of hard not to, because so many, you know, people in the public eye wind up being problematic, and it's almost like you have to be problematic to have the, I don't know, whatever it takes to become famous. I don't know. I really did promise a ramble, and that's what you're getting. And like the incoherence I have in talking about this exemplifies why how I feel about that deck, about the Waite Smith deck. You know what I mean? Like, I'm even looking at this and I'm thinking about like all the great decks I have that, you know, have queer characters in it, that have people of color and people of body, you know what I mean? And this doesn't have any of that, you know, and I'm like, oh, I miss that. So like, I'm really thrilled that there are creators who have done, you know, work to reclaim the tarot from the white Christian esotericists. And I think one thing that this deck actually does really nicely is it kind of de-Christianizes it mostly. You know, and the other thing I guess is like, sometimes when I've been doing like Pip deck readings or like a Grand Tableau with Lenormand, you know, it's a specific kind of coding and decoding reading with Pip decks or cartomancy decks that when you come back to the Waite Smith, sometimes if you're very familiar with it, you're like, oh yeah, that's easy. I forgot how easy that is. You know what I mean? Like, sometimes I'll be in a situation where I'll use a spread that has meanings, you know, set meanings, and I'm like, oh right, that's easy. It's easy to read this way. Instead of, you know, what I do, which is, and you'll see it at the end of this video when I shuffle and draw for you. See, this is not totally de-Christianized, but you don't have the host. Is that like, I will do like the meaning of the meaningless, you know, the unassigned or undocumented undocumented. What the fuck is wrong with me? I took an edible. That's what's wrong with me. And you know, undeclared. I don't know why I can't find it. The spread is just laid out, and you read the cards in context to each other. When I read a spread like, you know, that has set meanings, I'm like, oh wow, that's really easy. And it's not like, that's not to like discredit the technique. It's just that I've learned to read in a way that is very effective for me, and has been for others too. And it's very nonlinear, and it relies a lot, I would say, on intuition, maybe more than reading with these kinds of decks, Waite Smith style decks. You know, and it's a little more taxing to do that. So when you come back to a deck that has images or keywords, you're like, oh God, I don't have to like sweat, like the thing is right in front of me. You know what I mean? Like that, it's just kind of a breeze, you know, in a way. But, you know, if it were always a breeze, then I wouldn't want to do it. This is a really interesting reinterpretation of the Eight of Cups, incidentally. This does give a little Hanson Roberts moment, you know what I mean? Like, there is some similarities in the style, but this, like, color palette is so exciting to me. Just these rich hues. It really is beautiful, and I don't think that you really get a full picture of it, you know, until you see it. Now, the other thing I should say, too, is that when I went to their Etsy shop, they were not yet selling this. It was a Kickstarter. I assume they're going to sell it, but I only just got this a couple days ago, and you're seeing this even after that. So, and they were just doing the shipping out the Kickstarters. And there were, another thing I should say is that there was 3 versions of this. This, to me, is by far the most lovely. The other version had a black border and was all holographic, like the whole face of the card. And then there's one with like a pink border that has maybe like a different holographics. To me, like the cleanness of this is what I need. I actually frequently love a black bordered card. I don't love a fully holographic situation though. Like this is just enough. Any more, and I wouldn't clientele with it. You know what I mean? Like I probably wouldn't even be showing it to you. But there's just something sort of really lovely and like just lovely energetic. Like again, and to get back to the thing, right? Like this may well have been made to demonstrate what this printing company can do, but they did not slouch on the art. You know what I mean? Like I do think that it could more actively undo the things that make Rider-Waite-Smith unattractive to a lot of folks. At the same time, it's actually richer and more beautiful art than it has any right to be, weirdly, So, and I wish you could see the holographics really as they really are, because it is something subtle. I think the video makes it look a little more busy than it is. And in full sunlight, it's not busy. And in no sunlight, or in direct light, you can't even really see that it's there. What it does do in not direct sunlight is it actually creates sort of a shadow, a facelessness in the figures, which I quite like. Because I will say that for a Waite-Smith deck, this is relatively neutral tonally. It's not tipping its hat, even in the more negative cards. This is really beautiful. Even in the more negative cards, it's not really tipping its hat in the usual way. It does have a fairly neutral quality for a Waite-Smith deck. So I love this page, too. This feels a little more Page of Swordsy to me, but I'll take it. Page of Pentacles is always my favorite knight. And the least like me. Probably that's why. So let's zoom out. I'll show you how it shuffles. This camera always wants to tilt. Yeah, so it's relatively thick. It's matte cardstock, but actually, if you can get your hands around it, it riffles really easily. Like the cardstock's actually really nice. I don't know any of the details of it. I don't know what the fuck a GSM is, but this is not my first time shuffling it. I have definitely played with this deck because it's got a really satisfying riffle, which I'm a die-hard riffler. And I do have small hands, and I'm getting old, so, I'm not always great with, like, the big meaty decks, but, there's something about the texture that the embossing and the gold leafing adds that I think actually makes it more effortlessly shuffleable, because I think it creates little air pillows in the cards as you shuffle. So it's a very delicious shuffle. From a production standpoint, like I have no complaints. It's beautiful. The cardstock's gorgeous. The printing's beautiful. The somewhat experimental or optional, the holographing, subtle and kind of magical and not inappropriate, or I guess inappropriate isn't really the right word. Just not distracting and ugly and cheap. I mean, that's the thing I think that ultimately a lot of the holographed or stamped cards can look cheap. Even though it's quite expensive, it makes them look like you got them out of like a candy machine or like a gumball machine. So I'll just lay some out for you. Excuse me. So yeah, like this is how I would traditionally read, right? Like I lay out my 9-card box and I start in the middle and the top left, and I have to figure out, okay, I've got the Six of Pentacles and the Hanged Man. What does that tell me? Does it give me a theme? Does it give me something to work with? And then, I go from there. That takes work, you know what I mean? I quite like doing it, but it is work. So, yeah. Anyway, it's beautiful. I don't know. I don't know what to say about that. So there's just some ramblings about that deck, about Wade Smith. There's lots to say about it. I could write a book on it. I won't, but it's gorgeous. So I'll leave the Etsy shop below, and the Kickstarter link, and if you want more info. But yeah, this is the Soul Sparkle Tarot, by Wheel of Fortune Printing. Yeah, just checking. Take care, be good, and talk soon.